Darling, we've had one hell of a time, but the question on everybody's mind, where is the body?
Welcome to Ideas Don't Bleed, a comics podcast presented by Ashcan Press and featuring Matthew Rosenberg and the Supple Boiz, Ethan S. Parker, and Griffin Sheridan. This is part 2 of our discussion with Zeb Wells on his career and his current run on Amazing Spider-Man. We hope you enjoy.
When I've been reading your run, like that's something that I really noticed is like you do a really good balance of nodding to the past and then recontextualizing things, but also taking all of that and making something that feels fresh. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like, you know, when a book is 900 issues deep, like you sort of have to do that. You can't just be like, guess what? Now Spider-Man is this entirely different thing. And you can't just do a greatest hits record. And I think it has to be a recipe that uses, you know, parts of what's come before in new ways. And and I think you're really good at that. And that's sort of interesting. I wonder, really, for me, Spider-Man works best, and a lot of the Marvel universe works best for me as street level. Like I love street level heroes. I you know, the Stan Lee world outside your window as a kid growing up in New York City, like that was such an important concept for me because it was always like, well, I get that Galactus is cool, but like, you know, Night Thrasher is a guy I could see in my neighborhood. Like that seems so much cooler in some way. And yes, I'm going on record saying Night Thrasher is cooler than Galactus. But
yeah.
But I think, you know, like there are tendencies when you're reinventing the wheel with Spider-Man, and great ones, to do, you know, your Spider-Verse, your all these big ideas, and you brought it back. You brought it back to he's getting his ass kicked by gangsters. Like and I love that. I love seeing it again and like refocusing, like that's the core of the book. Why, like, do you feel like that's the core of Spider-Man? Do you feel like that's your Spider-Man? Is that, or do you want to take it? I mean, you don't have to tell us plans, but like, is this a slow build, or is this like,
where's all this going?
Is this cruising altitude? Yeah. Can you tell us what your last issue plot is?
No, I do think that's Spider-Man. I do think he works in all that stuff that you listed. He did. He worked on the Avengers. He works in the Spider-Verse stuff. But I do like that base to build on, that base of the street level stuff. And I think that I was very cognizant of that even back in those 3 Blizzard issues that you talk about, that, okay, we're going to have Spider-Man face a Mayan god. Yeah. But how do we keep it Spider-Man and street level, even in that? And I do think that is my Spider-Man, the street level Spider-Man. I like that the best. I love those scenes in Kraven's Last Hunt where like Mary Jane is just in their crappy apartment and she's depressed because Spider-Man hasn't come home yet and she's worried. Like it's very like almost soap opera. And that's my favorite. And then with that, you allow yourself to take that street level character and put him in fantastical situations, but you always wanted to bring the street level with him. You want him to bring the small human soap opera with him. And with this book, I think that because it comes out twice a month, which is its own thing, its own albatross, its own challenge. And if John Romita Jr. was drawing every issue of this, I think naturally I would probably keep it a little more gritty street level. But it's kind of fun because you have Ed McGuinness coming on and drawing an issue. And I physically can't, and I don't think it's a good idea no matter what. I physically cannot write a John Romita Jr. story for Ed McGuinness to draw. Like that does not feel good to me. Like I only want to draw an Ed McGuinness story for Ed McGuinness to draw, or something that I feel like his art is trying to tell. And of course, I'm not going to get that right, but it makes it more interesting, I think, when you're trying to do that. So the different artists sort of allow me to go away from that street level for certain stories.
Sure.
I really liked the way that it like switches tone entirely between that first arc and then 900, because the first arc is so deliberately paced in a way that I really like, and you have things like just the mask being bloodied the whole time, and so it just has this very visceral feel, and then 900 becomes so bombastic and crazy. Was that daunting, like all of a sudden switching into that big anniversary situation almost right away?
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. And then it feels like it split the audience, whether whether you want to like do a big massive chapter of your big story or if you just want to celebrate. And I don't know if I did it right or not, but I just chose celebration. I chose like trying to come up with cool stuff for Ed to draw, and I mean, and I also really wanted it to be a big, long, juicy story, because I don't know if you guys remember that, but when I was younger, just getting your hands on one of those annuals and it was an actual like, it wasn't a bunch of smaller stories. It was just you felt like you had finished a novel at the end and deserved credit,
For sure.
Well, I'll say, Ethan and I were talking about 900, of course, when it came out. First off, Ramita's art has been great the whole time. Ed absolutely knocks it out of the park in 900. Yeah. There's so many great pages in there that I feel like are already seared into my mind. And we were talking about the nature of an anniversary issue and the nature of it being so early on in your run. And Twitter is fucking Twitter about it and is so split on what to do with an anniversary issue. And we were like, listen, it doesn't have to be, some of Slot's stuff where 700, 800, those are all like these massive, huge stories, huge moments for his for his overall thing. And then you have something like 900 that is just a smaller thing with a really fantastic idea. We loved everything involving the living brain, bringing back a Ditko, a fun twist on like a Ditko era villain or something from the Lee Ditko stuff is like just always right up our fucking alley. And then when it all comes down, it's an anniversary thing. We got to talk about what makes Spider-Man. And I think Ethan and I both thought
we did a podcast covering the Ditko stuff and that thing, the way the usage of the "who is Spider-Man" question, really
so good.
Like,
really smart.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you guys liked it. I tried. And I tried, and I'm super happy with it. I just think as like a one-off story, I think it's super fun. I love having that under my belt, and then with like 70 pages of Ed McGuinness art, it's like, come on, fantastic.
Ridiculous.
Come on.
His Jonah is so angry. Let's I think obviously Slot's like decade-long run, like you said, he's got so many ideas. It's so full of different ideas, obviously, and then you have something like Spencer's run where you can feel it going back to basics and more to a ground level sort of situation, especially towards the beginning of his stuff. And so, between those two things, those are like the big sort of approaches you can have to a Spider-Man run. So how is it coming into this one after like we've already had a bunch of different crazy ideas and then the idea to go back to basics and then there's Zeb Wells Spider-Man run? Like, is that sort of like a oh damn it, I would have done one of those things situation, or is it again just like no plan, we're going in, let's fucking write the Amazing Spider-Man?
That I think that's what I had to do, as a defense mechanism, because also you talk about how many ideas Dan Slott has. Spencer is an idea factory too, and he's got like 12 high concepts in issue, and he's also good at building to these massive stories. So it was almost like I had to bring it small because I'm not going to out big idea Slott or Spencer, and you have to like sometimes play your game, and not embarrass yourself by trying to outdo the guys that have done it, that have played their game and played to their strengths. And so part of it was like, oh, I'm not going to win that battle. I can't out big idea these guys. I just don't do that. And so I have to build this book around what my strengths are and then let the cards fall where they may.
For sure. And of course, right before this, Matt, please.
Fair.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, yeah, when I wrote 5, I want to say 5. Here, we're gonna have the Spider-Man writers talk for a second. I wrote, I think, 5 issues of Amazing with Nick and Nick's run. Their dot some letters.
LR.
There you go. .lr. Thank you, Griffin. We're friends again. And the I found that, like, I found Nick's scope, because I'm working off his outline and his ideas, and like the scope of it, I was like, oh, I'm not this writer. Like, I'm not. My brain doesn't work like this. Like, I'm much more gravitated towards the like dig into one idea and really tear it apart. And he's more like, well, you're getting pulled in 6 directions. And I feel like Spider-Man, at that moment, I was kind of like, you need to be seeding things 2-3 years out in Spider-Man. And it's really like, it's really brutal and hard for me. But the thing I found most interesting about it, and like, I don't know if he was right or I was right, but we went back and forth because I was really driven to do the like quips, to really do the jokes, and like, the nastier it gets, the more he's making those jokes. And I was dealing with a bunch of the like other Spider characters, and like who there is making the jokes and who isn't. And Nick was like, this is a really like a dark moment, like you need to dial the jokes back. And I was like, that's not how it feels to me. And like we went back and forth, and like, I mean, he's a scholar of Spider-Man more than I, and so I was like, and it was his book, so of course I deferred to him. But I wonder, for you, who is funny and is a comedy writer and got your chops in comedy, like that balance for you, like where you're digging in and going, doing more grounded stuff, doing more street level stuff, doing more core Spider-Man, like how do you know when to do the comedy and when not to? That's the thing that I couldn't quite crack.
I think it's a good barometer for me, and I like that it's there. I like that he makes so many jokes, because for me it is there that you can turn down the jokes and suddenly you can tell it's serious. Suddenly things are, oh shit, this is scary. And then let it be scary for a little bit and then kind of pull you out of it, or show his bravery by making a joke to snap himself out of it. And then that's the light that shines through, and he kind of goes towards that. So I personally do like him stopping the quips if it gets scary enough. But he's always got, he will always get back there as things brighten up a little. But I think everyone's different with that, Matthew, and I don't think you're wrong with your idea. It's just, it is a tightrope you're walking, because you don't want him to be a psychopath. You don't want him to be a cartoon character,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the moment in your run when Tombstone has him tied up in the basement and then is like, I'm going to go kill Robbie and shoot all these people and stuff, and he stops the quips, I was like, oh, that hits really hard. Like that. Really
that did hit hard. And Romita's art helped, and the lettering, Joe's lettering helped. That suddenly, I really thought that was effective, and hopefully that doesn't sound gross to say, but I was the same way when I read the lettering. I was like, I'm kind of, this isn't fun anymore. Like, this isn't fun. Spider-Man, Mr. Jokey guy, is like screaming is begging and screaming for Tombstone not to go out and kill people.
That's been my favorite part of the run so far, I think, has been Peter's voice, because he'll be legitimately very funny, but then like when it gets down to those moments, like a thing that stuck out a lot to me in the Tombstone arc is him webbing up all of the thugs, and then like he drops down from the ceiling and is like, sorry guys, I'm out of web fluid. Like that's like such a great serious Peter is like a tone to hit, and then funny Peter is a tone to hit. I think it's hard to balance that, but I think it really does land.
Yeah, and I gotta give a shout out to Romita Jr. there, because that line, that all those beatings, I fully map those out, because I feel like that's my job as a writer. I don't turn in a script that isn't a script. But then he's John Romita Jr. Like he can do whatever he wants with that action scene. Like this is Spider-Man beating up a bunch, and so he had moved that stuff around, and think that's another thing that's come with doing this for a long time is when you see something moved around and not what you had in your head, it's an opportunity now, and you just like it's easier to let it go because I just don't think you want what's exactly in your head unless you're Alan Moore. I'm not Alan Moore. I've had to make peace with that. And whenever someone does something different, a lot of times it makes you write something different. And that was one of those moments. And we found something that was like so much cooler and like said something about Spider-Man, like you said. And so I don't know, that's always, that's I think been another part of me enjoying this more is you take your hands off the reins a little bit and you just let comics be what they're supposed to be, which is a little chaotic, a little sloppy, a little, a bunch of people trying to get one thing done, which is fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like one of the things that I was curious about, and I think you touched on it a little bit, but you talked about getting your childhood ideas of Spider-Man out the first time you had the character and sort of being, now coming to it with fresh eyes. Like, do you feel like your relationship to Spider-Man beyond just having gone through those stories at this point in your life is very different? Like, do you feel like when you look at the work where you're like, I couldn't have written this before, or is it just I wouldn't have had fun writing this before, or like, who you are now, having returned and done all these other things, like, is that changed Spider-Man for you? Are you?
It must have, because my writing's changed. And when I go back and reread those old Spider-Man issues or stuff that I was doing in that time, I can still appreciate like how hard I worked at making sure every page had something interesting going on, that every issue had turns, and I was trying to pack it with as many ideas as I could. I never phoned in anything, but I also can see that I went too hard on some of these. Like there's a few too many ideas, a few too many words. Like, I thought getting one more joke in or one more idea was so important so that I would look smart and they would never know that I don't know what I'm doing, that I can feel the tension. And I feel like my writing now is a little bit more freewheeling, like it flows a little bit better. I'm constantly taking stuff out of the word balloons. I'm constantly asking, does this need to be here? I do want my comics to be over before you know it. I want you to be like, oh God, that was quick. I never wanted them to feel like homework. I want them, I just want you to blow through them. And to that end, I don't want to fill. So here's a concrete way it's changed it. I do not want to fill pages with captions that are internal monologues of Spider-Man explaining exactly where he's at. I want John Romita Jr. to show you where he's at.
Right.
And one little line or one little look or something to show you where it's at. And those captions are such a big part of Spider-Man that I still use them, and I use and I don't think I'll ever stop using them. I flirted with stopping using them, but and sometimes you need them. They're useful, but I am not trying to show people that I'm a smart writer anymore. I am not trying to fill up pages with text that people are going to, like, say, oh, look how much work this guy's doing. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that anymore. I want everything to be sparse, read easy, and, like just a vibe of we're all relaxing and having fun here.
Yeah,
sure.
I've never heard someone say the thing that I think a lot of writers feel, which is you said like, oh, I want it to be over before you know it. And it's such a weird intangible thing because like the negative spin on that is like, I paid money for this and
nothing happened or
or it was just like, oh, I paid money for 9 minutes of my life or whatever. However, but I think there is something to the like getting caught in the moment that you're speaking to, of like just being lost in it very quickly and just the immersion. I remember
like wrapping up while everybody's still having a great time, like knowing when to
it's like that Seinfeld George Costanza that he makes the joke and then whenever it laughs he's like good night and just walks out. I mean, I remember years ago when I first got on Twitter, someone was yelling at at Brian Bendis about how fast they read an issue of one of his books, which is funny because his books are very talky. But like, someone was like, I read this so fast and I paid money for it. And I remember just thinking, like, this is the kind of guy who goes to a restaurant and asks them to burn his steak because it takes him longer to chew it. Like, it's like the time you spend with something is immaterial. It's it's how you leave it, how you feel when you leave it. And I really love that you were like, I want him to be over before you know it. It's like such a smart way to think about the character.
And it is a balance, because I do still want it to be like that is in no way saying it should have been fast for me to write, you know, like I want it to be heavily worked again and again and again, so that those pages that are reading fast are giving you a lot of story. You're right. I just felt the need to defend myself.
No. I mean, I really like it, because I think that I feel like that is something that people feel a lot, writers, that like, what do I want people to feel when this ends? Like, how do I want it? And I think a lot about, like, I mean, I think I've even talked about it on the very few episodes of this podcast, but like Robert Kirkman or Brian K. Vaughan, like their page 20s, their last pages always leave you, like, you put the book down and you're anxious and you're like, fuck, I need to know what happens.
They are so good at that.
They're so good at it. And like, there's a lot of people who are masters of that, but there's something to the whole book of just like the way it moves, having an urgency. And a lot of that is through editing, through cutting back. And I feel that in your book very well, that like, you know, like the tombstone Peter in the limo scene. I was like, these guys, I could read you. My thought was like, you're so good at the banter, you're so good at the dialogue. I was like, I could read pages of this. And then when it ends, you're like, oh, that was perfect. Like, that was it. Like, you got right to it. It's funny, it's great, and then it's over. And there's no fat on the jokes. There's no fat on the scene. It's just smooth and clean. And I really, it's a real skill. And it's nice to hear you be like, I've sort of leaned into that and learned from that. Like, that's a exciting thing as a writer, to see other writers like growing after all this time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I've got one more question. Mary Jane's got kids. Now, I'm obviously not going to ask you what's going on, what you're up to. Pete's kissing on Black Cat. My question is, Spider-Man's a very romantic character. He's a very soap opera character. He's got a lot of love interests. He gets around. What do you like to see from that? What do you want from that? Like, because I feel like everybody has a different motivation they go into Spider-Man wanting to see from him romantically. And where does your interest lie with that part of the character? What do you go into Spider-Man stories and into writing them hoping to see from that area of the character?
I guess I do want chaos in a soap opera way. I want chaos. I want happiness and sadness and all of it. And I think this was just a way. I don't know. It's interesting, because I think if someone was ever going to write the last Spider-Man story, Spider-Man and Mary Jane should absolutely ride off into the sunset together and be married. We're just living in a world where that story will never be written. Like, there is not going to be a last Spider-Man story. So this stuff is going to be like cycles, you know? And I think, I wanted to try something different, and I don't know. I guess I would rather write Peter and Mary Jane trying to be together or not being able to, you know, than being together. And I do think that, and I grew up with them married, so I don't have a problem with that. Like, if they were married, I would certainly write that. But you do find that when they were married, there were a lot of trips Mary Jane was taking. There were a lot of jobs.
A lot of getting kidnapped for months at a time.
For months at a time. It's like, it's a real be careful what you wish for situation, because you find yourself, we wrote Spider-Man a happy ending. Oh shit, this story does not end. Right. Okay, so now this, now that, now this. And so this is just one of those now this is. And again, I want to be very clear that I'm trying to play a little dangerous here. I'm trying to play like I wanted to take the brakes off a little bit. I've lived my entire life and my entire writing career not pissing anyone off online. Like it's just people are kind of like, oh, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, he's being inoffensive. Another inoffensive Zeb Wells comic, you know? And I'm not trying to be offensive at all, but I tried to just be like, okay, that could be interesting. Let's go see if it's interesting. I could be fucking up massively here. And I'll have to eat that shit if I am, but let's just see what's over here. And yeah, so that's what I'm doing. But I guess my answer to that is as painful and chaotic and soap opera-y as possible, with little wins, little wins for Peter in there along the way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I think let's end it on just a fun Spider-Man question, one that we like to ask ourselves from time to time, and other big Spider-Man fans and folks that have worked on the character. Just top of your head, no thought about it. You get to take one Spider-Man piece of media, whatever it is, a comic, a movie, one of the TV shows, whatever it is. Like, what are you taking to the grave, pretty much? What's the one thing that you could...
Zeb Wells, Amazing Spider-Man #1.
And I can study it and celebrate it.
That's right.
The way it deserves. That's a really tough question. I want to say Amazing Spider-Man Annual 1 where he fights the Sinister Six, because I do feel like that contains Spider-Man. Everything about Spider-Man is contained in that. I reread it before I did my run, just expecting it to be a fun little silly story, but it just has everything in it. It has Peter losing his powers, but choosing to go fight the Sinister Six anyways, even though he's almost certainly going to die, but he does it anyways, because he's, being Spider-Man is more than just having those powers. He doesn't give up ever. And then it's got all those villains, and it's got him messing up his private life because of his superhero life. But I really love that first Punisher comic I read, where I think it was Spider-Man and Punisher team up against Moses Magnum.
Okay.
But you can pick one Zeb Wells.
I know.
We'll just write down that you said Spider-Man .lr trade paperback.
Right? Yeah.
That'll be okay, got it.
Okay.
Matt, what about you? What would you say?
I would say something really sacrilegious and horrible that'll get me in trouble, but
okay.
I would say the first arc of Ultimate Spider-Man.
Yeah, of course.
That's
right,
we'll bleep it. What's the sacrilegious one?
No, that's the sacrilegious one. I feel like people
that's
like,
the sacrilegious.
Yeah, I feel like you're supposed to
no.
pick something for Amazing, but
No.
To me, Ultimate, like I loved Amazing before Ultimate started, but when Ultimate started, I was like, oh, this is mine. Like I felt ownership over it in a way.
Yeah, Ultimate's kind of our jam as well. Yeah.
That's quite a run, man. That was fantastic.
It's my favorite superhero, like long superhero run in all comics for sure.
That's my first comic as well. Somebody gave it to me on the playground in first grade.
Oh yeah. Good. That's awesome. Well, Zeb, thank you for your time. I know you have an important massage to get to, or
gotta loosen up, guys.
Swimming lessons, whatever it is. But thank you so much for joining us and hanging out. And it's, as always, a pleasure to see your lovely face. Do you want to tell our billions of listeners where they can find you online and yell at you and all those things?
A lot of those are bots. Some of them are people.
They're mostly Russian bots, but they'll yell at you just the same.
I am on Twitter at Zeb Wells, but feel free to ignore me. There's nothing hot going on over there. My Instagram is a wasteland. But check out Amazing Spider-Man if you're into that sort of thing. She-Hulk is coming out. I wrote on that. That's
great. The show.
Fun. Yeah, the show. Clarify. The show. Yes, the show. The television show. So
yeah, we didn't talk about
I wrote the 7th episode. I think the 4th one just came out. So stay tuned.
Awesome. Do you want to tell us what happens in it so we can spoil it?
I don't think I should.
No,
that's fair.
Whatever.
That's fair.
I'm trying to make this interesting, but this was wonderful, Zeb. You're a hero to men and women across the world, and we love you. And thank you so much for hanging out.
Love you guys. Thanks for the thoughtful questions. It was great hanging out.
And that brings us to the end of our discussion with Zeb Wells on his career and his current run on Amazing Spider-Man. If you haven't already, make sure you go follow Zeb on Twitter at Zeb Wells to see everything he's got cooking up. To get the latest episodes of this podcast, as well as news, giveaways, and even comics delivered straight to your inbox, go to ashcanpress.com and sign up for the newsletter. We'll be back next week with another wonderful guest, and in the meantime, you can write to us at ideasdon'tbleedpod@gmail.com or tweet to Matthew Rosenberg at ashcanpress on Twitter, me at Tales to Astonish, or Griffin at Griff Sheridan. We'll include some of your correspondence on the show, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. And big thanks to Summer People for our theme song, Where's the Poison? Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Where is the